Good morning. So today we're going to be planning our story. We're going to be planning our story, and we've already created the character and written about that in several paragraphs. We've done our setting description and worked out where they're living. Of course, this story doesn't have to be just about where they're living. It could involve different things. It could be the human being's house, which we haven't described, but that's okay because we can describe it along the way. So the first thing we need to do, I've been watching some videos from some authors and they've given me some ideas, so I'm going to play those for you so you can hear them. Hang on. Yeah, this one first. The meaning of stories, that says.
Stories are about hope, I think. Hope that the world makes sense. Hope that our lives make sense. Every story is about a problem. The main character's got to have something wrong in their life. My story, The Robot and the Bluebird.
Okay, The Robot and the Bluebird. It's a lovely story, but it's very poignant. What David Lucas was saying is that there needs to be a problem. So that's worth thinking about. So in The Borrowers, the main problem was... Anyone? You're all very quiet this morning. So each element has... each story has a problem that needs resolving. So the problem occurs and then the resolution is the story. Okay? So...
Well, for writing stories, all you really need is a pencil and a piece of paper, and the same for drawing pictures. You never know when you're going to get an idea, so I always carry a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper with me. But I think the best stories are the ones where the person telling the story is having fun and telling the sort of story that they want to hear, rather than the sort of story that they think they should be telling or that people want to hear. All good stories have three simple things: a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's amazing how many people forget that, because sometimes stories have a beginning and an end but don't really have a middle and it feels too abrupt. Sometimes stories have a good beginning and a good middle but don't really know how to end, and sometimes they don't really have a good beginning. So it needs all three things, I think, to be interesting. Don't worry too much about getting it perfect and the language perfect. I think just keep going and just keep writing and figure out what happens, and then you can always go back and change the way that you've written the sentences, or change the way in which things happen or appear. But if you can see the story in your head, then just tell it and don't worry about too much of the details.
This is a really important thing. So we've talked about the fact that get your ideas down. Get them down on page, and then don't be afraid to edit. We always say about that, and I know it's one of the hardest things, but read your story, read it to a loved one at home, read it to a brother or sister, or hopefully their loved ones too, but read it to people and don't be scared of their feedback. Don't be scared of them giving constructive criticism, it's called. So positive ways you can change the story to make it even better. Oh no, it's
and don't worry about too much of the details at the very early point. It is hard to know how to end a story sometimes, and often what I'll do is, if it's not coming naturally and right away, I'll put it away for a little while and go and work on something else, and then come back to it weeks, months, years later. And with that amount of time, you almost come back with fresh eyes and you can see things that you didn't see before.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make a story map. Okay, so this is where we set out what's happening in the story, where your character starts, what's happening, what is the purpose of the story. And we've got to think about those three elements: the beginning, middle, and end. We've got to think about a problem that your character's got. That's at the beginning. We've got to think about kind of all of the elements of how they're going to fix the problem. And then we think about the resolution, which is the ending, okay? Your characters could go on a journey. They could, very similar to the borrowers, or it could be resolved within their house. It's entirely up to you. Now, the way I like to plan stories is, so I typed into Google story map, and you can see there are lots and lots of different ideas. Now, this is for someone who likes writing down their ideas and getting it down and know roughly what they want their beginning, their middle, and their end to look like. And so you've already done the setting and the characters, and then beginning, middle, and end. Now, I find this quite tricky because I like to draw things. I like to get ideas down on the page. I like to draw them without having the constraints of actually having to write down all my ideas. Because what happens if I start writing my ideas about the beginning, it kind of flows and I miss lots of opportunities to add in extra things. And also, when we are editing it, it makes it pretty difficult to crowbar in things halfway through the text. So what I then did was I typed in story mapping, and by this amazing man called Pi Corbett. Bit of a strange name, but he developed writing by using story maps. So you can see with his... Oh, why isn't that open? So we've used this before, and why isn't that opening? Goodness me. It's always when it's on film. So it's called Talk for Writing anyway. So you can see here the gingerbread man. This is a yellow group, so this is in class. So you've got the little pictures that remind you as the writer how the story goes. So a book opening and just a few words just to remind them. So once upon a time, there was a person with a starfish. No, I think that's a gingerbread man. The idea is that the pictures don't have to make sense to anyone other than the person who's telling the story. So if I'm going to do it, I make sure that the pictures are purposeful to me. So once upon a time, there was a baker with who made a gingerbread man. And then the two hands. The two hands represent, for this story writer, that unfortunately, she dropped the gingerbread man, and then, because these arrows represent conjunctions, either subordinating or coordinating conjunctions, and you can see actually that on some of them it's written. And as we go through the set of pictures, it tells the entire story in shorthand, in short form. Now, this is especially good. Well, I mean, this is the story of the gingerbread man. But when you're creating your very own story, it's really good to order your events, because you might have an initial idea of what's going to happen, but this allows you to really get in. So maybe here you think, oh, but this happened. And when you're retelling this to your mum or your dad or a loved one, they'll say, oh, but what happened at that point? And you go, oh, well, this happened. And then, well, it's not written down. So you are able to then crowbar in and put some more detail in. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a Pi Corbett style story map. And we're going to put down on our page our ideas for the beginning, the middle, or the end. Remember, the main character, there needs to be a problem that they need fixing. Okay? So I prefer going from left to right. and it can snake down the page, just like this one here. And remember to leave some space on the page as you draw it, because you don't want picture 1 to be 18 lines long, to be half a page easily, and then you've got no space for anything else. So if you're using lined paper, I always say 3 lines or 3 or 4 lines for the picture, and then leave at least the same amount of lines, so 3 or 4 underneath, just in case you need to add any extra detail. Okay, we've done this before, and what I've done, because I can't quite deal with just pictures everywhere, is I've drawn 3 lines. I've drawn a ruler line, or a straight edge if you haven't got one, along the page, and then counted 3 or 4 lines down and drawn another line, and that allows me to work within that box. And then I go from left to right, from left to right, from left to right. I've realised that the screen's the other way around. Left to right, left to right, left to right. So, and you can get all your ideas down on the page. So that is today's task. We are getting our story to a stage where we've got our plan and we know how it's going to start. And then tomorrow we will work on the introduction, and then we'll build up the rest of it, each bit at a time. Okay, so we're going to create a story map. Now, if you'd like to get this on film, what we need is a close-up shot of the actual story, and you can, it's called narrate over the top, so you can read through the story, because the pictures won't make sense to us on their own. They need that audio description that you're going to provide, so they need you to read it out so it makes sense to us. Okay, so I hope you've got a plan for today. If not, have a think, maybe have a look at a few of the clips of the borrowers to give some examples. If you have no idea whatsoever about what to write about, then I suggest you stick to the story of the borrowers and you can retell it. Okay? Fantastic.